Before I set up the agency, I used to work in-house with many different brands, and part of my responsibility was designing the team that would work on e-commerce project. Now that I've moved on to the other side of the fence and lead Ford Baker, I get asked a lot about, from brands, what should their Amazon team look like and what should that structure be? So we're going to talk about that today. Before I dive into exactly what I think what type of organization you need within your Amazon team, let's look at the principles and trends that will influence what that structure is and what your resourcing requirements will be. First, it's really important to recognize that Amazon is becoming more complex. Gone are the days when one person could know everything about selling on Amazon and do everything that you need to do on Amazon. Content, advertising, operations, customer service, international expansion. All of these things have got far more complex and developed much, much further over the years. So it's impossible for one person just to know absolutely everything. Second, and it's really closely linked to that idea of complexity, is the fact that Amazon is just far more competitive than it used to be. Competition means that everyone needs to refine their skills. You can't just be good at lots of different things. You've got to have experts in all of these different areas. Thirdly, Amazon has improved access to data across many touch points. It used to be a bit of a black box, if we're honest, especially compared to the data that you will get from your own website. That's changed drastically. Amazon has released a lot more data. Some of it useful, some of it not so useful, but it gives you much more control over the decision making and you're not running blind. Of course, when there's lots of data, you've got to decide how you use that data. And then that's going to be considered as part of the types of skill sets that you need within your company. Fourth, and you may have heard this before, and you may recognize this from your own experience with Amazon, Amazon is essentially pay to play. What do we mean by that? You've got to advertise to have any success on Amazon. For 99% of brands, that's going to be true. So you've got to really think about advertising as a specialist skill and treat it as such and give it that kind of credence within your team. Fifth is scale. Amazon as an entity has marketplaces in over 18 countries and it will continue to expand that. Now, if you have those ambitions to sell globally, or you already are, then you're going to need a team that's able to do things at that scale. And that is not necessarily an easy thing to do. One is just purely the number of people that you need, but also the structure and the way that you manage those processes need to be considered really clearly, and the lines of responsibility between different people within the team. Then sixth, advertising, as we've already discussed, is integral to selling on Amazon. And in days gone by, it was relatively simple to advertise on Amazon, but it has become increasingly complex and sophisticated. Sophisticated is probably the fairer word for it. What that means is you've got far more choices to make in terms of what type of ad format you use, what bids you use, where you advertise, so on and so forth. The choices are endless. Now you need to have people that are doing this day in, day out. You can, one, just to keep on top of the amount of change, but two, really just to harness the amount of data they're getting, the potential for growth that can come with a really great advertising strategy. And that requires, again, more specialization. So to quickly recap on that section, what do we expect and what do we need from a team? There's going to be complexity, so we need to have experience. There's more competition, so we need to refine our skills. There's more data, so we need to be able to handle that data and use it sensibly. We know that Amazon is a pay-to-play platform, so advertising is going to be critical. Scale, it's a global environment, so how do you deal with that kind of organizational demand? And then finally, advertising has become really sophisticated, and you need to ensure you've got the specialist skills in place. Now, with that all in mind, what we really suggest is looking at a blend of generalized strategic players within your team plus specialization. This is the model that we use at Ford Baker. So we have a group of people that oversee our client work, and then we have specialists that are looking at individual channels and they are refining their skill sets within that very particular area. What that allows us to do is to offer scale to our clients, and you can do the same thing within your team. So I really recommend having that idea of Generalists are there to set the objectives, strategy, reporting, overseeing things. And then people with a specialist skill who can really advance the business in that one particular area. So what are the fundamental skills that you will need in your team? First is strategy. What are you actually trying to achieve? When are you going to achieve that? How might you launch into new countries? How might you launch new products? Essentially answering those bigger questions. Secondly, product marketing and trading. You're ultimately there to sell products. So how do you sell that product in the most efficient way and understand how the Amazon platform works? Copywriting is a critical skill, and sitting alongside that, graphic design, video and photography. As part of that video and photography, advertising creative is becoming increasingly important too. So it's not just about the product images and what the listings look like, but video creative for your advertising team to use. We've already talked about how important advertising is. That is absolutely a specialist skill. Make sure you recruit for that. And then SEO and conversion rate optimization. So they're the skill sets that you will need to cover in your team. How you structure yourselves and what levels of seniority you need in those different areas is really dependent on your brand and the scale that you're operating at. But you will need to cover those areas. And as I say, really recommend having that blend of generalist and specialist skills within the team. So in addition there, I've talked about how you might structure your team. So the obvious question you might now be asking is, how does an agency fit into this? Now, obviously, I'm slightly biased because I do run an agency, but I was, as I say, in-house for 10 to 12 years, working with lots of different agencies and internal teams and looking at how those two entities and groups of people should fit together. If you think you need an agency, then you've got to ask yourself essentially 3 questions. Do I need to move quickly? In which case an agency is ideal because they've got ready-made resources and I can quickly bolt that onto what I'm already doing. Do I need scale? Am I working across multiple countries? Am I expanding rapidly? And therefore I just need a team that understands how to do this globally and have got that sort of ready-made experience. And thirdly, a need for specialization. Now you might have generalists within your team that can oversee things, but let's say for argument's sake, you're struggling to recruit specialists within your team. If you've got really big ad budgets and you know that that's a critical element of your business and you've got to make the most of that money, you need to have specialists. And if you can't recruit for that, then obviously agencies are there to provide that kind of level of specialization. So when you're thinking about what your team should be, remember that generalists and specialists blended together is the perfect kind of approach. You're going to need an array of skills across different marketing channels, plus content, plus strategy. And lastly, remember that flexibility is really critical as well. Amazon is going to change, the requirements are going to change, and you need to be mindful of where growth is going to come from in the future and what type of resources you will need to take advantage of those opportunities in the future.